Have you ever thought about what would happen if hundreds of thousands of people, all at once, saw something impossible, like a glowing figure just appearing in the night sky? I know, it sounds like science fiction, right? But this actually happened. It happened in Cairo, Egypt, and it kicked off this incredible mystery that sits at the intersection of faith, politics, and, well, human psychology. Okay, let's dive into the amazing story of the Zaytun apparitions. Right off the bat, this one quote tells you everything you need to know about the scale of this thing. This was not some small fringe event. No way. This phenomenon was so massive, so powerful to the people on the ground, that it went all the way to the top. The leader of the entire country, Gamal Abdel Nasser, had to go see for himself if what people were saying was actually true. And to really get it, you have to understand the world this was all happening in. The year 1968 was just pure chaos. It felt like the entire globe was on fire. You had assassinations, massive student protests, invasions. It really seemed like everything was falling apart. And then, smack in the middle of all that turmoil, something else, something totally different, starts happening in Egypt. All right, so let's zoom in a bit. What exactly went down in Cairo? How did this one ghostly figure manage to capture the attention of an entire nation? So it all starts here, April 2nd, 1968, in a district of Cairo called Zaytun. A couple of garage workers looked up and saw this brilliant, glowing woman standing on the roof of a Coptic Christian church. And pretty quickly, people identified her as a vision of the Virgin Mary. But this wasn't just some fleeting glimpse in the dark. Oh no, this was just the beginning. Now, to understand why this vision had such a massive impact, you gotta look at what was happening inside Egypt at that very moment. The country was honestly in a state of national trauma. Just a year before, in '67, they'd suffered this absolutely humiliating defeat in the Six-Day War. All that national pride the President Nasser had built up, it was just shattered. People felt this deep sense of shame, and the whole foundation of their modern secular state was suddenly on shaky ground. The country was desperate for a sign, for some kind of meaning. And boy, did they get a sign. These apparitions kept happening, on and off, for more than a year and a half, and the crowds just got bigger and bigger. We are talking about an estimated 500,000 people who claimed they saw these visions with their own eyes. On some nights, you'd have 250,000 people crammed into the streets, all just staring up at the roof of this one church. And here's what makes this story so fascinating. It wasn't just one group of religious believers. The crowds were a complete mix of society. You had Muslims standing shoulder to shoulder with Christians, Egyptians next to foreigners. You even had intellectuals and university professors out there, the people who are trained to be skeptical, and they couldn't explain what they were seeing either. That diversity is what makes this so hard to just write off. So now, let's pull the camera way back, because as wild as the Zaytun story is, it turns out it's actually part of a much bigger recurring pattern that you see all over the world. You see, the folks who study these things have noticed a pretty clear trend. These mass visions of the Virgin Mary, what they call Marian apparitions, they almost always seem to pop up during moments of intense crisis in a society. Zaytun fits that pattern to a T, but believe me, it is not the only one. I mean, just look at this list of some of the most famous ones. Guadalupe in Mexico, that happened right in the middle of the brutal Spanish conquest. Fatima in Portugal, that was during the absolute chaos of World War I and the rise of communism. Every single one of these took place when a culture was under an incredible amount of stress. So that leads us to the million-dollar question, right? Are these all just massive coincidences, or is there some kind of deeper link between a society falling into crisis and the sudden appearance of these powerful, almost hopeful visions? Okay, so the first big theory that scholars came up with looks at the outer world, all those social and political pressures that might just be the trigger for something like this. The basic idea is pretty straightforward. When a community is facing some huge threat that it can't really control, like a hostile government or a devastating war, or its whole way of life changing, these visions emerge as a kind of cultural defense mechanism. It's a way to resist and find meaning when everything feels out of control. And you can see that pattern laid out so clearly here. In 1870s Germany, you get visions when Catholics feel like they're being persecuted by the state. In 1930 Spain, they appear right when the new secular government is clashing with the church. In Italy after World War II, they become a symbol of hope against the fear of a communist takeover. And of course, in Zaytun, the vision offered national healing after a crushing military defeat. So when you look at it this way, these visions aren't just random miracles.
They're a deep social reaction. They're a kind of pushback against these big, scary forces, modernity, secularism, political turmoil, that seem to threaten the very heart of a community. It's a way for people to band together and find hope when it feels like there's none left.
But is that the whole story? I mean, does politics really explain everything? Some thinkers, especially those influenced by the famous psychoanalyst Carl Jung, would say no. They argue we have to look at the inner world to really get what's going on here. Their whole point is that, yeah, the political situation is obviously super important, but it doesn't really explain why the visions look the way they do. Why this specific symbol of a glowing motherly woman appearing over and over and over again. And to get their argument, you need to know about this key idea from Jung called the collective unconscious. He believed that deep down, beneath our own individual consciousness, we all share this kind of psychic inheritance, a deep reservoir of symbols, memories, and instincts that are common to every human being, no matter where or when they lived. And bubbling up from that collective unconscious are what Jung called archetypes. You can think of them as these universal blueprints for characters or ideas that show up in myths, dreams, and religions all over the world. Figures like the hero, the trickster, and, this is the important one for us, the great mother or the saint. So, here's the difference in a nutshell. The socio-political view says the vision is a reaction to something outside of us, something happening to the community. But the Jungian view says the vision is a projection from inside us. It's the collective mind of the people trying to restore balance and heal itself from within. The theory is called compensation, and it goes something like this. When a society gets totally overwhelmed by what Jung would call masculine energies, things like war, aggression, rigid politics, conflict, the collective psyche gets knocked way out of balance. So to fix that, to compensate, it spontaneously creates a powerful symbol of the feminine, things like nurturing, compassion, peace, and mercy. And who is the ultimate symbol of that? The Virgin Mary.
So, which one is it? Is it the outer world of politics or the inner world of the psyche? Well, the most powerful answer seems to be that it's not an either or question. It's both. The magic happens right where those two worlds meet.
I mean, just think about the specific symbols people saw at Zaytun. The Virgin Mary is the ultimate archetype of the mother, right? She represents that nurturing feminine principle that a society traumatized by war would be desperate for. The bright, luminous light she was bathed in, that signifies something divine, something beyond our grubby everyday world. And the doves people saw flying around her, that's a universal symbol for peace and rebirth. These weren't just random images. They were the exact symbolic medicine that a wounded nation needed at that exact moment. And that kind of leaves us with one last big thought. Zaytun was over 50 years ago, but this pattern isn't ancient history. When our own societies face crises today, and we have plenty, right? Political division, economic fear, ecological anxiety, what powerful unifying symbols are we, maybe unconsciously, creating to help us find some hope? What are we all looking for in our own sky?